Hello, I'm Alan Bruzon, the Chief Officer of Citizens Advice Eastbourne. Welcome to another episode 4 of the Advice Matters podcast. And I have with me Councillor Teri Sayers-Cooper from Eastbourne Borough Council. Welcome, Teri.
Thank you, good to be here.
Can we start by you telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Eastbourne born and bred. I was born here many years ago, more than I care to remember. I have lived in lots of other places as well, so I have lots of experience of living in different parts of the country and the world. But born here, I was elected in 2022, I think it was, 2023.
Right.
I was elected in 2023 as a local councillor for Hampden Park Ward, which is where I was born and brought up.
All right. So how is it becoming the councillor for that area? How's it been?
Do you know, it's interesting because my background is in community work. I tend to consider myself as somebody who is a community worker with a slightly influential email address, which is very handy. It also means that I have access to people and services that I wouldn't have if I wasn't a local councillor. But my experience of working for well over 30 years in community has been incredibly useful and supported me in helping to support people within my own ward. And of course, although I don't live there anymore, I only left there about 3 years ago, it's still very much a part of me. So I understand the nature of the ward. I know it very well, like the back of my hand. So yes, but of course I'm not just an Hampden Park Ward councillor, I'm an Eastbourne Borough councillor. So I also sit on various committees, including planning and licensing, and I'm a champion for disability, champion for young people, champion for equalities, and I'm also the women and girls' rights champion.
Okay. So a lot to have taken on in quite a short period of time. Tell us about that last role, the Women and Girls Champion. What does that focus on?
So just to put that into perspective, it's a really unique role. It's very rare at all across the country, and it's one that I created. I spoke to our lead councillor and said, can I be the Women and Girls Rights Champion? He said, yes, of course you can, Teri. And it came about, I was talking to someone even before I was elected who said that they felt that women's and girls' rights were regressing, going backwards rather than progressing. And given that women and girls have still not attained equity in various different things like workplace and lots of other ways, it seemed like something I should be looking at. So I did start to look at it, and it was like, whoa, this is big by nature. But last year, around this time last year actually, I was poorly and I was watching some stuff on TV and the computer, just gelling up on information about women and girls, and I came across the 16 days of activism, the United Nations 16 days of activism on gender-based violence against women and girls. And with that, I started to look into violence against women and girls, particularly in the UK rather than internationally, and also around domestic abuse. And this became very much part of my focus and my passion. So I focus on women and girls' rights in general, but particularly on violence against women and girls, their safety, and also around domestic abuse.
So can you tell us a bit about what the statistics reveal about violence towards women and girls?
So we know, in particular with domestic abuse, there is going to be at least 1 in 4, statistically in this country, 1 in 4 women and girls are victims or survivors of domestic abuse. So just to put that into context for Eastbourne, we have 105,524 population in Eastbourne. We have 52.3% of those are women, which is 58,237 women, which statistically means that around 14,500 women are victims or survivors of domestic abuse and violence. Let's hope that that figure is exaggerated, but statistics suggest that no, they're not. We don't know the real amount because so many people either don't realise that they are victims of domestic abuse or they do not disclose.
Yeah. So that's the estimated figure. When you mentioned that to me earlier, I was thinking about the agencies that I know of that are involved in supporting domestic abuse or all aspects of it, and thinking about their capacity to be able to respond to this level of demand. And I think also earlier on you said this problem is now increasing.
It is. Statistically across the country, it is increasing. Let's have a quick look at the prevalence of violence and sexual offences. So I'm talking about East Sussex here. In 2025, there were 4,222 offences of violence and sexual offences reported to the police, which is a 1.9% increase over the figures for 2024. So we know that that's just violence against women and girls. That includes violent sexual harassment and violence on the streets, that sort of thing as well. Rape, that includes those sort of things as well. In Eastbourne, the overall crime rate is 40% higher than in East Sussex as an average. So we have a much higher crime rate. And there's been an increase over the past 5 years between 2018 and 2023. VOG-related reports increased by 37%, according to police data. So it's a problem. It's a really big problem. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is, I say this to people, I was in Langley Shopping Centre last weekend, and I was talking to a couple and said, oh, well, we don't know anybody, there's nobody we know that, so it doesn't impact on us. I said it does, because everybody knows somebody, it's just that they haven't told you. And that's the thing about domestic abuse. We all know somebody who is a victim or a survivor of domestic abuse. They just don't disclose. They don't tell you.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things that we do at Citizens Advice, is to help people understand when they're talking about the situation that they're in. So a lot of people don't realise that the situation, the experience that they're having, particularly in the family setting, is actually forms of abuse. And I think sometimes that can be quite eye-opening to people to realise. Is that part of the reason why things are undisclosed? Is it partly that people aren't aware of what makes up abuse, or even what the law might say about it?
Very much so. The terminology was changed from domestic violence to domestic abuse for good reason, because domestic abuse is not just about violence, and it can come in so many different ways. So it's a pattern of controlling behaviour, coercive behaviour, threatening or violent behaviour, and that is the domestic abuse. That's between an intimate partner or a family member. So, for example, we know that sons of women also commit abuse against their mothers. And against their sisters as well. And so we have different forms of abuse and also of violence. So there's sexual violence and abuse. There's stalking and harassment. There are also harmful practices. But in terms of domestic abuse very specifically, there is physical abuse, which I think we all know about that. That's the hitting and the slapping and the pushing and the burning. And then there's also sexual abuse, and that's around unwanted sex. Which could be referred to as rape. But there's also controlling or coercive behaviour, and that's a pattern where the acts are designed to make somebody feel like a subordinate or dependent, and that includes things like isolation, monitoring people. So you might say, I'm just going out, and your partner is tracking you on their phone. You're even telling them where they're going, but they're just checking where you're going. There's psychological and emotional abuse as well, and that could be verbal threats, gaslighting, where you're made to feel as though you're the problem, rather than it being the person who's perpetrating the abuse. And then there's economic abuse as well, and people don't realise that they are being abused from a financial point of view, and it could be that your partner is keeping you in the place they're keeping you just through finance.
So there are many different aspects to this. It sounds really challenging, specifically for the individuals, but also for people who are trying to provide support. There's a whole range of different agencies just in Eastbourne that specialise in this area. You put together a group to address this. I don't want to get it wrong. What's the title of that group?
It doesn't have a title.
Oh, okay.
I called it the 34, but it's much bigger than the 34 now. I initiated this earlier this year. It's less than a year in the making, to be perfectly honest. And I started to contact lots of different organisations. So the local domestic abuse organisation, Citizens Advice, and also I was really keen to make sure that we involved organisations like Sanctuary and Diversity Resource International age concern, because people think that domestic abuse only happens within a certain age group. No, it happens to older people as well, and also there are a lot of survivors of domestic abuse within the older generations too. So I started looking at all of those organisations, and also to specialists in the field. The police are definitely involved. I got in contact with the Sussex Commissioner's Office and they were immediately on board. East Sussex County Council immediately on board. And I brought a group of 34 women. I was really clear that it was only women in the room. And that's because we also had some survivors there. And I'm really clear that this is trauma-based as well. So we need to be careful about who we're working with. And the power in the room was immense and intense. And we came up with lots of thoughts around what we needed to be doing, and that's around raising awareness, for example, where the gaps are. There were lots of organisations in the room that didn't even know that other organisations existed. We had the refuge there, and then I managed to make some contacts between people at that meeting as well. So that's where it started. And that was only in July this year that we managed to have that first meeting. Right. And from that, we have now grown the 16 days. And we're still in the 16 days at the moment. Yeah. And then we're looking at the strategy, how we're going to move on next year until 2027. When in theory, although we're not quite sure what's happening about elections at the moment, that's when my term as a councillor comes to an end. But I would like to see a strategy or a policy in place that can be carried over thereafter. But I have to work with those agencies. They're the professionals.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really important piece of work, and it's interesting that there wasn't a forum of that kind that I know of previously, so it's a good thing to have set that up. And I hope that there's continuity of something like this, that it stays there all the time, that it's necessary. What would you say are its main aims?
So there are a number of things that we need to be doing. First and foremost, raising awareness, which is what we're doing today, which is telling people, actually, what is domestic abuse? What is violence against women? How do you keep yourself safe? So it's getting the information out there so that people understand how they can relate to the trauma that they're in at the moment, what position they're in at the moment, and where they can get help to get out of that position. That's one of the main things. It's also, for all of us, it's very much about how do we relate those problems elsewhere. So people say it's a woman's problem. Actually, it isn't. It's a man's problem. And misogyny is on the rise, and we know this particularly through social media and in young men and boys as well. Misogyny is on the rise, and this is thanks to people I hate mentioning his name, but Andrew Tate, that kind of YouTube influencer. We know that misogyny is rising. So what we need to be doing is finding ways, I hate using the words educational training, but we need to find ways in which we can empower men and young boys to stop the violence against women and girls by calling out other men and young men to ensure that it stops at that point. So that's another one of the things that we need to be doing. We need to be making sure that our services are all connected so that we can signpost to the right place, and that all of those services know what the other services do, and that there is crossover between the services, but we're not double counting, as it were. It's really important that we do that. Another thing is important is that our services are the specialists. They're the professionals, they're the specialists. So we need to make sure that the services that they deliver are kept and that they are financed. So we know there's a funding crisis in charities at the moment, just generally there's a funding crisis. So we need to ensure that those services are not just maintained, but that they are able to grow. And in that way they can support the victims and survivors as well. But also, there is the mental health of men and young boys as well. That needs to be considered. I have recently come across a gentleman called Michael Conroy who works very specifically with men and young boys. And the problem for teenage boys in particular is huge. And I mentioned Andrew Tate earlier. The impact of influences like that have severe traumatic impact on teenagers and young men. That needs to be looked at as well, and I would like to see if we can some way empower services to deliver that help in mental health support for men and young boys too.
A huge amount of work involved. I think there was recently a government announcement about including these sort of aspects in the school curriculum. I don't know any more details about what that's going to involve. Is that something you're aware of?
I'm aware of it. I also don't know any more about the details. I think it's crucial, absolutely crucial, that this is on the curriculum. There are things like healthy relationships taught in schools, which absolutely that needs to be taught as well. But I think it needs to go a step further so that women and girls know when things are not right, and they need to know where to go as well. And that men and boys know when they're doing something that's not appropriate. Catcalling is not appropriate. If you hear a friend doing that, call them out and say, no mate, that is not appropriate. Because it's the smaller things that then rise to the much bigger crimes that eventually end up in the really significant sexual and violent crimes.
Yeah, so those things become like the thin end of the wedge. Yeah, so later in this podcast I'm going to be talking to Nigel Goodyear, particularly about the White Ribbon campaign, which is something I've been very interested in recently. And I think it's an absolutely essential part of the work that you're doing, that the focus turns in the direction of men, especially young men, to be able to change, to push back this kind of tide of... And there's a number of different areas that come under the EDI banner where we seem to have gone backwards in the last 10, 15 years. And so things that were previously considered to be quite sexist are now becoming normalised, and particularly through social media, etc. And it is a concern. It's quite a surprise that we seem to be sliding backwards, and also there's some political traction in that as well. There's one or two names that I'm not going to mention who are contributing to that and encouraging it, and that becomes an influence also, that it legitimises certain unacceptable behaviour. And that's the confusing message, I think, that young boys going into adulthood, that they need more guidance about how relationships are supposed to work and how those interactions are supposed to work. And it feels sometimes for some that they can get quite lost in that situation and latch on to something which is really unhealthy and is not going to produce positive relationships for them for the rest of their life. That's pretty much likely if they continue with that. So tell us what's happening during the 16 days of activism.
So there have been several things that have happened. We started out on the 22nd of November. 16 days of activism is from the 25th of November through to the 10th of December.
Right.
And that is it's the UN 16 days of activism, and it's about oranging the world. So it's about highlighting the issues of what happens around the world. Of course, we're talking very specifically about Eastbourne, but it is about highlighting the issues around the world. So what we did was, what we are doing is we have the Mothers Union did a service on the 22nd of November, which kicked the whole thing off. At the same time, we also had a stall running in the Beacon Centre. And at the same time, again, just after the service, we held a walk that was from the Victoria Place that went down through the town centre, and then we had a few people speaking at the Bankers' Corner. It was great to be able to just get out in the air and just open up to people about what this was all about. And we actually did have quite a few people come and talk to us as well, including one gentleman that came and gave one of our speakers some flowers, which was a really lovely gesture. And I think people really do appreciate the fact that we're out there talking about this as an issue. So we also, on the 25th of November, which is White Ribbon Day, I was in the station with a colleague of mine, Kathy Ballard, who's one of our councillors, and also we were there with the community team from the railway, the Southern Railway. We were handing out white hearts that had been crocheted by the scrap store in Langley, and again it was just to raise the profile of White Ribbon Day and what White Ribbon Day is all about. And people were quite surprised, they didn't know it existed, and one gentleman actually signed up there and then as we were talking to him, so that was a real bonus, a real plus. I've also went and talked to the Girl Guides about violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, how to keep themselves safe, and just to watch out again for the red flags. We also then had a vigil on the 25th, on the evening of the 25th of November, which was the first day of the 16 days.
Right.
Throughout the 16 days, the clock at the town hall was orange with the colours of future and hope, which is what the UN 16 days is about, oranging the world. And we held that. A few people turned up to that. It was lovely. It was just a very quiet little moment where we just thought about women from around the world. I also spoke to the Trees Youth Voice. I spent a little bit of time with them, and they were painting canvases and they've been doing work over the past year around the violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, and they have worked really hard on this. They've been absolutely brilliant, and this was so that they understood more about it themselves, but could also talk to their peers about it. And one of them created a piece. I won't get the words perfect, but I am now using this on our notices. It's on my Facebook site, and it is, would you want your daughter to be abused in some way? And for me, she was 14, and that was just so poignant and so powerful. I'm now using that as a centrepiece, if you like, for the work that I'm doing. We are having a noisy walk on the 6th of December. Now, the reason for this was that we had a silent walk at the beginning of the 16 days, but women who are survivors of domestic abuse and violence wanted to be able to speak out loud. They don't want to be silenced all the time. They want to speak out loud about what the issues are. So this is going to be a noisy walk, which will involve lots of banners, it will involve whistles, and it will involve making noise. And again, it will end up at Speaker's Corner, and we will have survivors who will be speaking out about about what's happened to them. And I think, again, this is really powerful. So I'm pleased that they're going to be doing it.
So that's on the day when we're recording this today. This is actually tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Which is the 10th of December.
It is the 10th of December tomorrow, yes. So that's the last day of the 16 days of activism.
Thank you.
So that's going to be on that day. So that essentially is pretty much everything that we've done, but it has been quite powerful. We've been able to get out into to talk to people about the 16 days, but really crucially, we've managed to talk to people. For example, we were in the shopping centres talking to people about what they would do if they were in a shopping centre and they felt that they were being stalked. And a couple of them in Langley shopping centre said, well, I live just over the road, I'd go home. And we said, no, you wouldn't. That's absolutely not what you would do. What you would do is you would go to Tesco, which is one of the safe spaces. Sussex Police have a safe spaces programme. Shops sign up to this. I think some hotels may sign up to it as well. Businesses sign up to it. And those are places where the staff are trained to know what to do if somebody comes up and says, I don't feel safe.
Right.
So that's really important for people to know. Boots in Eastbourne, all the Boots and all the Tesco's, two really good places to know. So we talked to them about that, and we also talked about, for example, the White Ribbon Day to people, and we asked men if they would make pledges to say how they would support women, and how, if they saw a situation, how they might prevent that situation from getting bigger. So, for example, in a pub, if they saw something going on, they might just go to the bar staff and say, I don't like what's going on over there. And then it's things like, and people would say, well, none of this really affects us because we don't know anybody who's affected by violence and we don't know anybody that's affected by domestic abuse. And then when you start saying the figures and you just say, actually you do, you just don't know that you do, because everybody knows. Yeah, everybody knows somebody. No matter how old you are, you will always know somebody. So that's what we did. But also one of the biggest things that's happened is quite a lot of women have come out and disclosed to us that they are victims. And some of those are these extraordinary women who will be part of my new advisory group. I say mine, our advisory group. I think it's hugely important that you speak to the people who are the victims and most importantly, the survivors, because they're in a position to be able to talk about how it's impacted on them and what they think needs to happen, where the gaps in the services are, what they can do to support each other, but really importantly, how the services can help to support them better. And that's what we're looking for.
Wow, so a huge amount of work done in a relatively small period of time.
Yeah, it feels very powerful, I have to say. Now we need to grasp it and work with it so that we can make Eastbourne a safer place for women and girls. Yeah,
brilliant work that you're doing and leading with the rest of the group as well. And we took part in the silent march right at the very beginning. It was a very cold day, but it was good to take part, and you could see that it was getting a response from the general public. And I hope the noisy work will attract a lot of attention and help that conversation keep going. That's really important.
I think what is important as well is this will grow. So next year it will be bigger.
Yeah.
Definitely it will be bigger. After a year's worth of work, people will know much more of what the 16 days is about, but also the work that is generally happening around violence against women and girls and domestic abuse, the prevention of violence against women and girls.
Brilliant. Okay. So we're reaching the end of today's conversation. Thank you for taking part. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we wrap up? Yeah,
I think so. One of the things that I brought up with our comms team at the council was we're coming to the end of the 16 days, but actually it doesn't stop there. And at Christmas time, it's a really difficult time. It has the pressure cooker effect. People are spending more time together. People are concerned about money, and people drink more alcohol. And what happens is, where we're all supposed to be happy and enjoying Christmas period, for some people that's a really difficult and fearful time. So at Eastbourne Borough Council, they are going to put a web page up specifically around what to do if you are struggling, but also, and this is really important, for what other people should do if they think that a friend or a member of their family is struggling with domestic abuse. And again, I will say that's for men and for women. Obviously, I'm the Women and Girls' Rights Champion, but there will be information there. So I'm really pleased that this is going to continue, not just finish at the 16 days, but it will continue thereafter. Some other things I want to mention as well. The Sussex Police are doing a survey. I'm not quite sure when it finishes, but they're really keen. It's around violence against women and girls, and they're particularly keen for young women to fill in that survey as well. So go find it. It's Violence Against Women and Girls. It's the Sussex Police survey. There are a number of places where people can get support. So the National Domestic Abuse Helpline and the National Rape Crisis Helpline, victim support. If it's an emergency, always call 999. Always call 999. There is some other information as well. I want to get this information put on our website around if you're in a silent situation, so you can't speak. So you've called 999, but you're not able to speak, and there are particular codes, like you can put in 55, and then the operator will know that you're unable to speak. So I need to find out more information. I want that on the Eastbourne Borough Council website, so people know that if they're in an emergency situation, they can still get help.
That's really important. There's lots of useful tips there that maybe people aren't aware of, that are all geared around letting people alert others. That's really useful to know.
Absolutely. Yep.
Brilliant. Anything else you don't want to mention?
Just, use Eastbourne Borough Council website. If you don't know what domestic abuse is, but you think you might be struggling with domestic abuse, go and have a look on the Eastbourne Borough. Just put in Eastbourne Borough Council domestic abuse and you'll find the information there. It is a quick exit site, so it's not one of those sites where you need to struggle to get out of it quickly if somebody comes in the room and you don't want them to see what you're doing. There are different websites to visit, including from different cultures, and it's aimed at anybody who is struggling with domestic abuse. It's not just about women.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you very much for your contribution today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.